That would be good if it was a witticism, but you actually wrote it down. Interesting. And listeners, for those of you at home, can't see, it's been carved in stone as well.
Listeners at home, all of this is getting cut, so I sound a lot more spontaneous than I do. Don't pull the veil back. They don't need to see the wizard. What are you doing?
Are you the one who said you wrote it?
Ruining my mystique.
You said you wrote it.
Okay, well, I also don't have a consistent worldview. How about you let me say one thing and
that's for sure. That's for sure.
Then get mad at you.
You need the foundationalism that comes with Marx.
I need a better co-host is what I need. Welcome to Save Me From My Shelf, a literature podcast where we take classic tomes off their pedestal to make you less anxious about reading them. Our jokes come from a place of love and for a specific teaching purpose. However, if you think that making fun of great literature, and maybe some mild swearing, is offensive, this might not be the podcast for you. Hello, you are listening to Save Me From My Shelf. I am Abby, and Tea and Crumpets over here is Daniel, and this is a literature comedy podcast. Hi, how are you doing, Tea and Crumpets?
I'm well, thank you. Short stack. Yes, came off the cuff that. How are you?
We don't really call them short stacks where I'm from.
Makes no difference to me.
Okay. So we don't actually have any letters or recommendations. I don't think we have any corrections from the last episode on Oedipus. Do you have any? Did we look up anything, or did we totally disengage?
Just nailed it. Boy, did we nail it.
And we don't really have any fights recently that we've put up on polls.
It's all been painfully amicable.
Oh, God, I know. We could get into a slap fight in the parking lot later if you want.
Yeah.
So we don't have much by way of updates, but I do have a David Tennant update. I got a cease and desist. Come now, David, don't be coy. I can read between the lines here. He's playing hard to get.
Between cease and desist.
He's just, this little minx is Anne Boleynning me to try to pique my interest. David, if you want a producer credit, all you have to do is ask. There's no need for all these games. Okay. So Daniel, what is our text today?
Are you ready to laugh?
Am I ever?
I said, are you ready to laugh?
Am I ever?
Well, let me set the scene. It's the 1890s. Telegraphs, trains, threshing machines. The world, England in particular, it's consolidating commercially, politically, socially. And it's all centered on London, a city of 6 million teeming souls. And they all need milk in their tea. And that's a hell of a lot of milk. And someone's got to get it for them. The English countryside may look unchanged and idyllic, but it's changing. The old peasants are yeomen are long gone. I wouldn't want to be a young woman in that situation, is all I'm saying. And we know that because of this episode's book, Tess of the D'Urbervilles by Thomas Hardy.
A laugh riot, I can confirm. Goes without saying, we're going to spoil this book for you. We have some trigger warnings. Again, some of the old favorites on this show. Rape, infant mortality, murder, abandonment, executions, heart attacks, and stalking.
It's general poverty and stuff. Misery, immiseration.
The West Country.
Oh, yeah. It's not cool and I'm not interested.
Alright, do you want to do some background?
Yeah, Thomas Hardy. From Dorset.
So that makes him, is that an enemy of yours then, or?
I think the enemy of my enemy is my friend, and as an enemy of Devon, maybe the Dorsetites are, an alliance with them is something to cultivate. He had a kind of sort of lower middle class, maybe you'd call it artisanal background. He was an architect. Then he was a novelist. Then he gave up writing novels to become a poet. He lived a pretty long life, didn't he? He was born in the 1840s and died in the 1920s.
I think that his career is getting less lucrative as he goes along.
Well, can't you? It's a luxury to be a poet. Randy Bugger as well. The novels, they're all set in a sort of fictionalised version of rural southern England, aren't they? Called Wessex. So that's like Dorset and Devon and Somerset.
Yeah, I mean, you guys have probably heard of, at the very least, if you haven't studied, some of his other big hitters so far from the Madding Crowd, Mayor of Casterbridge, and Jude the Obscure. Again, all just rip-roaring, hilarious romps.
Cheerful stuff.
If you want to be super bummed out, read Jude the Obscure.
I'm living it. I'm bleeding living it. Trying to get in the academy. Okay, let's go then.
We open on rural Wessex. Not entirely sure where, somewhere. Not Cornwall, that's the important bit, apparently. So a drunk walks home and runs into a parson. That is a strong opening. This is like the start of a bad joke.
Now where's the punchline?
Yeah. Well, you'll be looking for it for a while.
Yeah.
And the parson greets this drunk by calling him Sir John, which sets this guy on fucking fire because he's just plain Jack Durbeyfield, no airs and graces. And the parson says he was hunting pedigrees a while back, so, you know, cool hobby, dude. And he says that he's discovered Jack Durbeyfield was descended from Sir Pagan d'Urberville, who came over with William the Conqueror. Now, Jack just goes bonkers at this news, so his tiny little drunken West Country body starts shivering and vibrating like a chihuahua.
I can imagine him having quite a big body. Carry on.
Oh, I pictured him to be quite lean and, like, underfed.
Oh, no, I imagined a sort
I pictured him as you.
No, I imagined him as a sort of bumpkin-y, chunky bumpkin.
Oh, I thought he was the sort who drinks most of his calories rather than eats them.
That chunks you up, right?
Can do.
The beer gut. Carry on. Sorry.
Okay, fine. Yeah, he's a scarecrow with a big beer belly. I think we can.
Okay, compromise.
Good
Yeah,
compromise.
that's very good
Okay. So he begins insisting that everyone start calling him Sir John. So this guy is a dime store Ben Kingsley. I don't know if you. Sorry, Sir Ben. I must be very careful to say. Jack Durbeyfield, Sir John, as he now wishes to be known, starts giving himself airs and graces in the only way he knows how, which is by getting drunker. And honestly, I can't think of a better way to honor the spirits of his Norman knight grandfathers more. So, good on ya.
Meanwhile, the rest of the Durbeyfield family, they don't know about Sir John, his new title, about their background.
Somehow I think he's gonna not shut up about it, so let's celebrate this little moment of oblivion for them.
Yeah, they're busy leading their lives as humble villagers. This includes John's eldest daughter, Tess, the eponymous Tess.
I think our listeners
People
can
might
figure
work
that out. Yeah.
I don't hold them in high esteem. Yeah, at this moment she's busy dancing with the other women of the village as part of the sort of May Day celebrations.
Just like real Wicker Man.
Well, what does Hardy call it? A gay survival from the old style days. So it's there's a queer reading for you.
You can't just say gay in this context does not mean.
Oh, I thought it did. I thought because it was an all women thing. Oh no, sorry, no.
Very, very funny. Don't undermine.
Besmirch the queer
Come
reading.
on.
Yes, I apologise profusely. Okay, they're doing May Day. They're all dancing around the maypole and stuff. Three brothers. They're gentlemen. Oh my word! There's some gentlemen approaching. I don't know what that was. They're all passing by during the celebration, and the youngest of these three brothers, Angel Clare, joins in and dances with every girl in the village except Tess.
I mean, maybe if Tess had shaken her moneymaker a little better, we could have avoided this whole plot we're about to go.
Yeah, and there's a lot of talk about the moneymaker, isn't there? That does come up. But
sorry, just hearing that come from your mouth.
Yeah.
A price beyond rubies.
Well, yeah. In fact, we've got all these funny oglings of Tess, haven't we, already? So he talks about Tess's accent, about how she kind of has the burr, the kind of southwestern burr, and she speaks it with a pouted up, deep red mouth.
He is obsessed with mouths.
Yeah.
He's got like a serious kink for mouths.
But he also looks at her eyes, the large orbs.
Yeah, but it's
There's a lot of silly writing in this, isn't there?
But it's mostly mouths. Do you think we need some sort of mouth sound effect? A little kissy every time he does
Yes, I think
little,
I like that, yeah.
Should I do a little sort of thing? Is that our
Are you going to
sound?
make your own?
I mean, I kind of have to make my own anyway.
What I'm saying, yeah, you're just going to reuse that, are you? You're not gonna...
Maybe.
That's cool. That's exciting.
Depends how annoying it sounds.
Yeah. But there's a lot of stuff about like history as well, isn't there? About the May Day celebrations surviving, the D'Urberville stock sort of surviving, you know. Time is passing, things are getting modern.
Yeah, there's a lot of time and fate in this, and things carrying over, or things being written in the stars to be passed down. Yeah,
but also like vestigial forms still kind of lurking in modern society.
Yeah, and they talk a lot about Tess's innocence, and I do actually really love the way Thomas Hardy writes innocence. It's not some sort of weird pervy thing as a lot of men writing innocent young girls could be. He does this in a lot of his books where he is very focused on sort of like childhood development and as the sort of natural process of growing up. So he talks about, quote, Tess Derbyfield at this time in her life was a mere vessel of emotion untinctured by experience. And I don't know, just he has a good turn of phrase about it. I feel like he really respects the process of growing up.
Yeah, it's a very humanistic
Yeah.
book, isn't it?
So Tess goes home all bummed out because, first of all, the hot guy didn't dance with her, but also because while she was at the May Day celebration, the whole crowd looked over at the local pub and saw her father lushing it up, and she was mortified. She's like, oh, aye, there's my father into the cider again. She goes home to her mother, who is just tending hordes of children, and the mother says that earlier in the day, Tess's father had also a bit of a traumatic sort of experience. He went to the doctor, and she says, your father's got a ring of fat closing round his heart, and once it closes, he'll die. Whether that be in 10 days, 10 months, or 10 years, who can say?
But it has to be a unit of 10.
It has to
In
be
10,000 years.
He'll live
So
forever.
John finally shovels off.
Yeah, so we don't know when it's going to be. Suffice it to say, I imagine it'll be sometime suitably dramatic. When's the worst possible time he could have a heart attack? Well, it'll be then.
Yeah.
So we have loaded.
Bear that in mind, listeners. Yeah. Chekhov's fatty heart.
Chekhov's congestive heart failure, well and duly loaded. So Sir John that night comes home too drunk to drive a load of beehives to market in whatever the Victorian equivalent of FedEx overnight is. So they make Tess, their teenage daughter, stay up all night and drive the carriage instead. And she's an unskilled driver, she's exhausted and driving in the pitch black, so unsurprisingly, she falls asleep at the horse.
Yeah.
And she's woken up by a crash, and she's been hit by a speeding morning mail cart, and it's killed the family horse Prince.
No, that's a sad bit, isn't it?
Postman Pat shanked Seabiscuit in the motherfucking chest. This is a grim opening. Like, it's
Yeah.
really gross the way they talk about, like, how the shafted
yeah,
engine...
it's very, the flank of the horse pierced, yeah.
So Tess is horrified, knowing not only will they not be able to sell their wares, but they've also lost their horse, which is the main source of their livelihood, and her family's basically now on the verge of bankruptcy. And she, quote, regarded herself in the light of a murderess. Should we maybe have a foreshadowing horn?
Yeah, hit me up with that.
Tess's mother, meanwhile, has found out that there's a wealthy lady named D'Urberville nearby, who she assumes is part of this, wealthy line that they're supposedly descended from. And she plans to send Tess there to, quote, claim kin, and basically start a visiting relationship. Hi, we're your poor relatives, can you help us out, sort of thing. I am so glad I don't have any money, because my family is so big, I bet, like, any boucher in the world could come up to me and say we're related, and I'm like, sure, pile on.
You're talking to a smith, so...
Tess, for obvious reasons, feels extreme guilt over ruining her family's finances, so she goes along with her mother's plan. She goes to the D'Urberville estate, which is called the Chase, and is surprised to see how new the buildings are, and she says, quote, I thought we were an old family. So she's basically like, what in the tacky Russian millionaire hell is going on? Turns out, the narrator tells us, this branch is actually in no way related to the Derbyfields. They are merely a rich, nouveau riche family who changed their last name to Derbyville.
They're from up north, aren't they?
D'Urberville.
Not even from round here.
Yeah, so they thought it would make them sound more dignified and give their sort of new money a bit more weight.
Yeah, trying to live the aristocratic life without paying the dues of being born that way.
What would you change your name to if you had to fake being posh?
Debauch.
Dirk Debauch?
No, Daniel Debauch.
Daniel Debauch. I like that. Sorry, I thought for a minute, I was like, I didn't ask you what your porn star name would be.
It goes both ways, yeah.
That might be her cold open. So Tess is paused outside the door of this mansion, freaking out like Maria von Trapp in that one song, when all of a sudden, a smoking dude walks up the driveway. He's literally smoking a cigarette.
Uh-huh.
And this is Alec D'Urberville. He's the son of this rich lady relation. He sees Tess and his eyes immediately turn into hearts, and he starts hitting on her almost instantly, I would say.
Yeah, he is kind of, in a sort of slightly bitchy way, he's amused by Tess's story, isn't he, about the poverty and the horse and everything, and so he decides to kind of indulge her, and by extension himself, by touring her around the estate, during which he has a basket. He has a basket of strawberries and kind of insists on hand feeding them to Tess. And
she was like, "Can I use my own hands?"
he goes, "No." It's quite a weird bit. I don't think you need to be a gold medal winner of Find the Phallus to see what's going on here.
In fairness, it's not just strawberries. He also forces a whole picnic on her. Romance, but make it weird and compulsory.
Yeah, an aubergine.
A banana.
Yeah. It's a train going in a tunnel. Yeah. So, that happens. So, Tess goes home, and after this kind of weird experience, and she's soon offered a job at the D'Urberville house tending chickens.
This poor girl is so disoriented. I actually really feel for her.
She's canny enough to know that something weird's going on as well, I think.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Even before he starts feeding her strawberries, she gets super bad vibes from this guy. She's like, I'm not entirely sure why, but something about this guy tells me he's a wide-awake night terror.
So her parents are pretty pleased with the chicken job. And they, when Alec comes to pick Tess up from their, hovel in a pretty nice, sports carriage.
Yeah, sick ride, brah.
Yeah, exactly. The parents are like, oh yeah, he's taking a shine to our Tess, so, and they think it might even lead to marriage, the deluded boobs that they are. And Tess is kind of like, I don't really think this is gonna lead to marriage. I think, you're wrong about that. Alec is a bit of a creep. Again.
Our Alec?
Yeah, I know, yeah. He's a bit of a creep on the journey back to the house in Trantridge, and he drives very dangerously and fast, so he can kind of hold Tess close to him.
Yeah, he's like, hey baby, you better brace yourself for some berserk mandatory passion.
Exactly, and she is not best pleased, to say the least.
Well, he doesn't really understand what's happening as well, because he's like, but you're poor. Aren't all poor country girls just giant slappers? Oh, I get it. You're doing a whole thrill of the chase thing. All right, I'm picking up what you're putting down. And he completely assigns these motivations to her that she does not have. He cannot fathom
It's a one-way dialogue or something.
Yeah, that she just would not be into him.
More ogling. I don't know if we want to go into that. She had an attribute which amounted to a disadvantage just now, and it was this that caused Alec d'Urberville's eyes to rivet themselves upon her. It was a luxuriance of aspect, a fullness of growth, which made her more of a woman than she really was.
Boobs. She's stacked, is what Hardy is saying here.
Yeah. She'd inherited the feature from her mother without the quality it denoted. What does it denote?
Well...
A mum's a goer? Is that the point?
No. I think it is denoting a maturity. I think the impression there, because they're talking about, to some extent, boobs.
Yeah.
Her mother has had several children.
Yes.
So I think it's denoting a sort of, she's a goer, she's feckin', she's an adult, she's a full adult.
But then there is this later bit also when Tess's mum is like, her trump card is her face, as 'twas mine. I like that bit when, it's nothing to do with being an aristocrat, it's to do with being a looker. So Joan kind of knows the score.
Yeah, but how much of a trump card is that if Joan Durbeyfield is married to Jack Durbeyfield? That's not that much of a trump card.
No,
friends.
they are deluded, aren't they?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so Tess gets to the manor and discovers that old Mrs. D'Urberville is actually great. She's really nice to Tess. She's covered in pet chickens and songbirds. She wants Tess to whistle songs to her birds all the time and just treat them almost like children. And she thinks Alec, her own son, is a giant piece of shit.
Chicken shit. No good piece of chicken shit. Chicken shit is the best shit because I'm a chicken lover.
Exactly. I was like, Daniel, I'll let you work it out on your own. You'll
she
get
would like
there.
that, yeah.
So Tess settles into life there. She actually enjoys her job, but she struggles to whistle. Alec and Hardy get a Hardy on, is the joke I wrote.
Very good.
Thank you. Ugh. As she's all puckered up trying to whistle. He really has a kink for mouths, though. It's weird. It was creeping me out a little bit how much he focuses on her puckery mouth and whatever.
Yeah.
And then Alec basically starts stalking her, including, brace yourself for this, hiding in his mother's bed like the goddamn big bad wolf when his mother isn't there.
Norman Bates character.
Yeah, and Tess has to go into the bedroom to whistle to Mrs. D'Urberville's caged birds. Daniel, this season of Undercover Boss is getting a little real.
It'd be better if he disguised himself as a bird.
I mean, but honestly though, what is the end goal here? In this dude's mind, what is the best case scenario for how this day is going to play out?
Well, it's just, as I was saying earlier, it's just the age-old, game of patriarchal, not to bring it down to a humorless level, but it's just about because you can, isn't it?
I mean, I didn't know if this was like Mr. B and Pamela. I was a bit like, is he...
He is a lot like Mr. B. I kept thinking that. He's like Mr. B.
But is he masturbating in his mother's bed, listening to Tess whistle? Is that what's happening here? I wasn't entirely sure what the implication was. It's something...
I'm going to say definitely yes.
Okay. Good, glad that's sorted.
Yeah.
That's the filthiest thing we've read on this show. So despite Tess liking her job, she doesn't really get along with the culture in the town. The locals are all hard-drinking, hard-partying people who go out every Saturday night, and she's peer pressured one night into going with them. She does not have a great time, it's kind of a rough crowd, and she can't leave because she doesn't really know the way back. And the people she came with, the other sort of like local workers, are just getting wilder and wilder and not showing any signs of leaving. So it's a sloppy night. This is Paris Hilton in 2003 levels of sloppy. So of course Alex shows up to the party like any competent stalker would, and this angers one of the women that Tess came with. And this woman is known for her dark complexion and dark temper as the Queen of Spades. And she's mad because she used to be Alec d'Urberville's fancy woman. So she tries to pick a fist fight with Tess, but Tess runs away because the Queen of Spades will fucking cut you. This reminds me a lot of the dirtbags I sort of went to school with and grew up with who would get into fistfights and scream like, "Hold my baby!"
Right. Can we have the bit actually where the fight starts? Because it's ridiculously written.
Go for it.
Because Hardy has a funny tendency, doesn't he, to veer from the sort of sublime into the ridiculous. So... To Tess's horror, the Dark Queen began stripping off the bodice of her gown, which, for the added reason of its ridiculed condition, she was only too glad to be free of. By the way, it's got treacle on it, hasn't it? Till she had bared her plump neck, shoulders, and arms to the moonshine, under which they looked as luminous and beautiful as some Praxitelian creation. What is a Praxitelian creation? I did look it up, some sculptor, but the point is that's really stupid writing.
Yeah, he's trying to hide his lasciviousness under, like, but it's art. But also tits.
Well, exactly. It comes back. In their possession of the faultless rotundities of a lusty country girl, she closed her fists and squared up at Tess. The faultless rotundities.
Faultless rotundities? Has Thomas Hardy looked into my brain, into my deepest dreams? You old pervert, knock it off. Right, so this fist fight is starting. Tess is like, absolutely not. Not in the face. The face is my fortune, my mother always said.
Well, yeah.
So Alec comes along and helps Tess flee with him on horseback. So he's trying to do some sort of white knight bullshit. But the Queen of Spades, who is his ex-girlfriend basically, starts laughing, saying Tess is out of the frying pan into the fire.
Can we just say that they laugh like this? Ho, 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 ha, 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 ha. There's a bit of crap writing.
Do they actually? I don't remember that.
Yeah.
So they're on horseback, fleeing the scene, and Alec once more tries to badger Tess into letting him be her boyfriend, because badgering always works in that regard. But she says she doesn't love him, and he's like, well, I just bought your daddy a new horse. Like, that's gonna send her into fits of thankful arousal, but it doesn't work. So he's like, why is this such a hard sell? I have money, Tess. Money to compensate for my piss-poor personality. They get lost in the dark. So he leaves Tess with his horse so he can climb up this really steep hill and get his bearings on their location. And when he comes back, she has fallen asleep on the ground because it's like 3 a.m. at this point. He leans over her, and then we fade to black. It's not 100% clear how this scene goes down, but regardless, whatever happens here, you can mark this space on Alec's evil bingo card.
We're in the second phase of the novel. The novel, by the way, is divided into phases, and this one is called A Maiden No More. She's not a maiden anymore. It's 4 months since Alec, we assume, assaulted Tess, and she's decided to leave the d'Urbervilles and go home.
Yeah, Alec is really pissed about this, so he's there replaying what he thinks is a date in the woods in his mind, going, where did I go wrong?
Yeah, he catches up to her, doesn't he? She's walking down the kind of highway, and he's like...
really early on a Sunday morning.
Yeah,
this guy pops out of hammer space. He's like a damn homing pigeon.
Yeah. I was wondering, is it suggested that they have a that the kind of whatever sexual relationship they had kind of continues beyond just that night.
I didn't think so.
I thought it was that, but I mean, it doesn't really matter.
I really didn't think that was implied anywhere. I didn't see that anywhere.
I thought it was implied. I can't remember how I thought that now, but people can write in if they have something. I kind of thought that she was sort of his mistress for a while, however coercedly.
Well, I don't think so, because she has hated him from the first moment she saw him, pretty much. She continues to hate him through the whole novel. Later, I mean, this was a real debate at the time, and there are records of people in the Victorian era getting into like huge fights at dinner parties as this very popular novel was brought up, because some people think she was a fallen woman and sort of consented to this. Other people thought she was raped. Some people thought she was raped and it was still her fault. So there was a whole like argument about this.
I mean, yeah, I kind of assumed that she was raped at the first instance, but I kind of thought there was something a bit weird going on.
No, I don't.
Afterwards.
I didn't get.
Well, I mean,
that.
she's still wronged, but I just kind of thought that he kind of was like, well, you're fallen now, you might as well. I thought he kind of did that sort of thing, and she was like, I thought it was that sort of. She was almost like a prisoner to him.
I didn't get that at all, because but she breaks up with him. Is the point.
Yeah. So,
I don't know if breakup is the right thing, but she quits her job and escapes her rapist.
Yeah. Tess has a bit of a go at him, doesn't she? He's initially kind of matter of fact, a bit callous about it, unsurprisingly, but she's like, oh, I wish I'd never been born, stuff like that, and he's like, well, maybe I did do wrong, but in a kind of very perfunctory way. She sends him on his way. Yeah,
he's a bit like, baby, if you don't love me, I'm gonna go away to London. And she's like, yeah, off you f***.
Yeah, why aren't you already there? And she returns to her village, and the circumstances surrounding this return becomes the subject of local gossip. And her mother is royally miffed that Tess gave up the milk for free instead of getting Alex to buy the cow. Like Pamela didn't do. Tess didn't do a Pamela, did she?
Admittedly, I mean, as much as I hated Pamela, that book ended a lot more happily than this one will, so...
Yeah, I think they're definitely very similar.
This would make a fantastic comparative essay.
Yeah.
So we cut to roughly a year later, and Tess is carrying a baby around. Where did the baby come from?
Where do babies come from?
That's what I'm asking. Well, there's a baby anyway. Worse still, the baby is really sick. Worse still, the baby is likely to die and hasn't been baptized. So Tess holds a DIY baptism and finally names the baby. She names the baby Sorrow because "you ruined my life and I wish you were never born" is a little too subtle. In fairness, her mother has had so many kids that I think most of the names were taken anyway. So then the baby dies and it's all very tragic. I'm trying not to linger on that too much because it's awful. The vicar, who doesn't think that Tess's homemade Instagram rustic baptism is legit enough, refuses to...
Glad we can find jokes in this moment of tragedy.
Look, Daniel, it's a defense mechanism. I don't know what you want from me. Yes, get therapy. I know.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I don't even need to be here, do I? Continue.
I'm working through some stuff.
Yeah.
Through the medium of this podcast.
Yeah.
So the vicar refuses to bury the baby in the cemetery because he doesn't think it's baptized
It's more my job's worth. I'd love to bury your baby where, but it's a man upstairs.
Doing the joke. Yeah. So Tess loses her rag and says she'll never go to church again. She ashes a cigarette into his dog collar.
Anyway, we're in a new phase. Yeah, it's a new one. And it's also a new one in Tess's life. 2 years on since her sojourn at the d'Urbervilles, she decides to go to a different region of the country to become a dairymaid. And this region is called Frome, the Valley of the Great Dairies. Everything's all big and fresh and open, and Tess starts to cheer up, doesn't she? Which is quite nice as she descends into the valley. She works as a dairymaid for Richard Crick.
Dick Crick!
Yeah, and settles into it all pretty well. It's hard work, but it's all kind of in a sort of wholesome, hearty way. Everyone's singing to the cows while they milk them. It's all like pretty idyllic. And we have the kind of meet cute where they're all milking, and Tess hears the genteel voice of some young man come from behind a cow. You know, that's classic meet cute material, isn't it? And it's Angel Clare.
Speaking of subtle names.
Yeah. He's slumming it in preparation for a future career as a farmer.
Yeah, so this was the guy at the beginning of the novel who I don't think she realizes for quite a while that they'd already kind of met.
Yeah, they don't work it out yet, do they? He is described as educated, reserved, subtle, sad, differing. So that's, the dream in it.
Right.
And we get a bit of background on Angel Clare. He's the youngest son of a rather puritanical vicar, but decided against university and all that kind of learned life to become a kind of practical man, and his family were pretty surprised by it.
Yeah, and Tess has some milkmaid friends here who I kind of view as the three bimbettes in love with Gaston and Beauty and the Beast, and they all really have the hots for Angel. Is he just the milkmaid whisperer, or is there a severe shortage of dudes in this area?
But there is that other guy that they occasionally talk about who's a Roman, so I suppose, yeah, there must be. It's because he's posh, isn't it?
Anyway, so the moral of the story is Angel is hot, he's nerdy, he's slightly rebellious in that he refuses to be ordained a minister. In short, he's my ideal dude. Let's see how this goes. I sure hope he doesn't betray me. So, Angel starts to notice Tess after she gives her hot takes on ghosts, which is how I have met every boyfriend I've ever had. Talk about ghosts often and loudly is my advice. Zup, boy, do you want to hear a story about Emily's Bridge in Stowe, Vermont?
I think I've already heard that story.
Oh, great, okay, well. Daniel is no-anding me. This sort of improv.
Sorry.
Tess, in turn, gets kind of turned on by Angel Clare after hearing him playing his harp, which is only a heartbeat away from Hardy insisting that dudes who play guitar are catnip for chicks. Come on. We are told that cows apparently have favorites. Some like certain dairymaids more than others.
This is a time for me to make an interjection. It's very important that I make this interjection. A new section of the podcast. A quiz.
What?
Can you...
Oh God.
Dr. Abigail Boucher, lecturer in Victorian literature. This is the real knowledge. Can you name
I have no knowledge.
all of the cows, or at least any of the cows that like Tess?
Oh no, I remember reading this list. No, I can't. Wait.
Come on.
Oh God.
$10,000.
It ended on one that had a quite an unusual name, didn't it?
That's good, but it's not right. Come on.
Why are you doing this to me? Why are you doing this to me?
Come on, I'm gonna have to hurry you.
It was one named Joe.
Oh no.
Violet.
That's better, but it's not right.
Maisie.
No, it's over. You've not won the camper van. I'll give you the names.
I hate this so much.
Dumpling. Fancy. Lofty. Mist. Old pretty. Young pretty. Tidy. And loud. I love that loud, the cow. Do you think you might be in the wrong profession if you can't even name all of the cows that like Tess and Tess of the D'Urbervilles? It's about remembering useless lists of things.
Okay. Don't think I don't see what's going on, which is that you want my job.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
People are going to be listening to us and being like, get her out of there.
Okay. So although their boss, Crick, likes to mix up the cow-to-milker pairings, Angel Clare organizes it so that the cows that like Tess best always go to her.
Oh.
Swoon.
Yeah.
Oh, it's very sweet. It's very wholesome. And this begins a flirtatious relationship with a lot of sweet nothings, stroke pessimistic observations passed between them. They really do bounce between the whole, like, you're real pretty, life has no meaning.
Yeah, yeah, there was a lot of that.
It's a very strange
like that as well, isn't it?
Yeah. It's also spring, when everything is beautiful and in bloom, and gee, I wonder if this is a metaphor, rather than when she got raped by Alec in the autumn, when everything was cold and dying. So we're gonna come back to this point later. Eventually, Tess and her three bimbette friends go for a walk, and they're encountered with the result of a flood. So there's a river that they normally cross, which today is too high for them to get across. Angel Clare shows up. He carries the other three milkmaids across the river purely so he can carry Tess last, saying, he sort of, they get all nestled up as he's carrying her, and he whispers to her, 3 Leias for 1 Rachel, which is fucking bonkers hot. Angel, don't make me attracted to you. I know what you're gonna do to me later. I hate this.
What's he alluding to there? Some biblical thing.
Jacob had 2 wives who were sisters. He was promised first to Rachel, who he saw and fell in love with, and the father got him to labor for 7 years.
Oh, right. and then
for
tricked
free.
him into marrying
And then
later,
at the wedding, they put the elder sister, who he was not into, in this really heavy veil. He thought he was marrying the girl he liked, married her sister, and then he had to work another 7 years for free to marry the girl he wanted to marry in the first place, who was Rachel. So Tess wrestles with her love for Angel for a while, and eventually she lets him kiss her at her cow.
She's sleeping on the road. She's kissing at a cow. She's a menace. I like all the sort of farm work stuff. We've kind of glossed over it until now, but...
I mean, a woman can only talk about so many butter churns in her life, Daniel. I had to cut you down, I'm sorry.
Thank you. The landscape is seriously lusty. Amid the oozing fatness and warm ferments of the Froome Vale, at a season when the rush of juices could almost be heard below the hiss of fertilization, it was impossible that the most fanciful love should not grow passionate. The ready bosoms existing there were impregnated by their surroundings, and so on and so on.
I'm gonna go take a cold shower for a little bit.
There's a bit where Angel finds Tess so attractive that he sneezes. I like that bit. Just a little
We've all been there.
Yeah.
Totally normal sentence.
Yes. Then Angel kind of goes off soul searching. So his sort of work experience at the dairy was just supposed to be a bit of kind of a preamble to the rest of his life, but it's become a major turning point because he's fallen in love with Tess. He goes back to his hometown to see his parents and to tell them about his intention to marry Tess. Angel he's kind of acquired some rustic manners from living on the farm, and that kind of distances him a bit from his dry middle-class family.
Yeah, his brother's like, ew, why do you act like a poor now?
Yeah, Angel's older brothers are there. One's a vicar, one's an academic.
Like us!
Yes, and like us, they are sort of fusty careerists and drearily conformist in their worldviews.
Do you think these guys just spend their day prank calling John Ruskin and hanging up?
And they're just kind of there, just being annoying and weird. His parents, they're a bit kind of perturbed by Angel's interest in Tess because they wanted Angel to marry the kind of local zealot girl, Mercy Chant.
Yeah, we got a basic bitch Christian chick named, again, subtle name alert here, Mercy Chant. Just let's all sit with this.
Maybe it's just in this one town. There's a lot of obvious names.
Let's just wallow in the basic bitchery of Mercy Chant. Continue.
But they're like, well, whatever, if you don't want to marry Mercy Chant, that's not our problem. And he's all kind of like, well, if I'm going to be a farmer, I need a farm girl, don't I? So that's his sort of case, isn't it? And they go along with it. Angel also hears that his dad had got into a row with a local bounder.
Who could that be?
Yeah, can you guess which bounder it is? It's not a new bounder, it's Alec d'Urberville. Angel's like, oh, Dad, you shouldn't be taking on these young bucks. And his dad's like, oh, it's all part of my duty to redeem sinners.
Angel rushes back from his family, his disapproving family, and proposes to Tess. And she initially refuses him because of all this gross misogynistic internalization that she's this tainted woman. And Angel's like, will you at least tell me why you won't marry me? And Tess is like, no, not unless you get real cool about a bunch of stuff real quick. And he is not to be deterred because he finds Tess just a little too arousing. So, Daniel, I know you wrote down a quotation.
Sorry, there's this really weird bit.
Does it involve mouths by any chance?
It involves both mouths and metaphysics, which I think are Heidi's two big peccadillos.
That's a very specific kink. Good luck typing that into Pornhub.
She was yawning, and he saw the red interior of her mouth as if it had been a snake's.
Ew? Or hot? Question mark?
She had stretched one arm so high above her coiled-up cable of hair that he could see its satin delicacy above the sunburn. Her face was flushed with sleep, and her eyelids hung heavy over their pupils. The brimfulness of her nature breathed from her. It was a moment when a woman's soul is more incarnate than any other time, when the most spiritual beauty bespeaks itself flesh, and sex takes the outside place in the presentation. What's going on there? That's mad, isn't it?
And also, Daniel, you have noted that there is some sort of ghost-style, sexy curd production.
Yeah, it's a good bit. No, this is if it doesn't contain metaphysics, I want the sexy bits to contain agricultural work. So they're all kind of squeezing bits of curd, aren't they, in a big vat? Always arousing. And during the squeezing of the curd, Angel leans down and kisses Tess's arm, and we get this bit. From her dabbling in the curds, her arm was as cold and damp to his mouth as a new gathered mushroom, and tasted of whey.
Cut to that Righteous Brothers song from Ghost playing on Angel's harp. Wait, my question to you is, why are you reading all of the sexy bits in this book? Usually that's something I would do.
I think there's something about the sort of vaguely kind of Schopenhauerian perspective that Hardy has on it that makes me think, yeah, this is something I can get into. You know?
Okay, well, you know...
Sex as misery and decay.
And agriculture. You know,
yeah.
Daniel, keep your freak in the bedroom. We don't need it on this podcast. This is a podcast for gentlemen, a podcast for sirs. What are you doing? So after this whole deal that I have just been put through, Angel persists in asking Tess to marry him, and she eventually agrees. So Tess writes to her mother to ask if she should tell Angel about the whole incident with Alec, and her mother writes...
I love the mum's letter. Carry on.
Her mother writes back, "Don't you fucking dare, you beautiful dumb idiot. Shut your weird eroticized pie hole, you sexy moron." I might be paraphrasing slightly.
You were missing out on the poetry of it.
I think
Why should you trumpet your trouble when others don't trumpet theirs?
Tess really struggles with this, as you kind of would do, and as their wedding day approaches, she decides, and this is like the most famous bit in the book, okay? So she decides to write her whole story in a letter to Angel and slip it under his bedroom door. And she assumes he got it and he read it, and the next day he turns up totally normal.
So, hey, good morning. Yep, pretty cool day.
And she's like, "Oh, great. Oh, he don't think any less of me at all that I born an illegitimate child." So she is over the moon. She's like, "That's great. He doesn't care. This is wonderful." When the wedding day arrives, Tess happens to go by his room, and she notices a tiny corner of the envelope her letter was in, peeking out from underneath the carpet. So when she slid her letter under his door, it had gone straight under the carpet. She didn't realize. Angel never saw it. He never read it.
He's all got his bills down there as well, hasn't he? So that's why his electric's been cut, and he can't get any internet. And
So the wedding is too close for her to pull out now, so she goes through with it, despite this obviously being, really stressful. I was not expecting a textile-based cosmic f***up, but here we are, and I was thinking that given the ideas of fate and foreshadowing in the book, I think, especially because Hardy had a lot of sort of classical understanding, I think the carpet represents the Greek mare, the three fates, who are associated with weaving and textiles, and this is further enhanced by Tess's vaguely pagan status. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
Very posh, very
Yes,
posh.
very-
And I'm the one who gets lampooned for saying Schopenhauerian.
I mean, because I've at least explained what mine is, and you just assume people know what
Okay, the
Schopenhauer is.
world is but illusion, and beneath it is a kind of eternally dissatisfied lust that drives all things.
Also, Daniel, it's cute when I do it.
Okay, yeah. There we go. Now we're getting to the crux of things.
So, they get married, everything goes smoothly, except a rooster crows in the afternoon, which is apparently a bad omen.
So they have a honeymoon in a mansion, or well, it's kind of a farmhouse converted from an old mansion that happened to be a possession of the ancient d'Urberville family.
Do you think this might be a metaphor at all, Daniel? A sort of, a ruined d'Urberville mansion that is now a working farm. That's a terrible honeymoon location.
Well, it's because Angel, Busman's holiday guy that he is, still wants to learn farming techniques, doesn't he? So that's why they've gone there.
Hi, honey. It's our honeymoon. I'm going to be working it. Also, welcome to all your family baggage.
Tess and Angel, they kind of settled into married life in a slightly awkward way, don't they? Like on the very first day of their marriage,
They don't boink, do they? I don't think.
I don't think they do, no. Although there's a kind of bit where they wash hands in the same bowl, which I think is just as good, isn't it?
Oh, what a revealing...
And it's clean. Then there's a knock at the door. It's a present from Angel's parents. They didn't attend the wedding, by the way, because they didn't want to hang around with peasant stock.
That's only going to make things better.
Nor did Tess's parents attend. Life of the party, Sir
better.
John d'Urberville didn't attend the wedding because he thought he wasn't good enough. So that's a bit sad. Presents arrived from Angel's parents. It's the family jewels. Get the old family jewels out. Then the guy with all their luggage comes to drop that off and says that one of the milkmaids back at the dairy, one of those ones who was in love with Angel, she's just attempted suicide.
Jesus, over this guy? Come on.
Yeah, well, just earlier on, you're all, esteeming the guy. The pair are all pretty low, so they decide to, instead of doing whatever it is you're meant to do on your wedding night, they decide to confess things to each other.
Oh, God.
Because there has been a bit of rumbling, hasn't there?
Please just have sex instead.
So Angel goes first. He says that he's got a shameful secret, which is that he plunged into 40 hours of dissipation with a stranger.
Ooh, that's only making me like him more.
So,
I got my popcorn. I'd be like, honey, spare no detail. Tell me all this word. I'd be like, if I were Tess, I'd be like, cool, talk me through.
Well, she doesn't do that. Instead, she's like, oh, that's a relief, because I've also got a similar sin. And she sits him down and tells him the story of her acquaintance with Alec d'Urberville and its results. And there's the cliffhanger.
Tess tells him what happened. And Angel breaks my heart and turns into a total shitbag and is disgusted by her confession. Tess is really shocked and she says, hey, I forgave you for having premarital sex. Why can't you forgive me for, in brackets here, the subtext being, for being assaulted? And he says, hold on, I need to take a breath for this because I'm getting so mad.
Yeah.
He says, quote, forgiveness does not apply to the case. You were one person and now you're another. My God, how can forgiveness meet such a gross prestidigitation as that?
A gross what, sorry?
Prestidigitation, sleight of hand.
Ah, thank you. Oh, yeah, digitation, interesting. Yeah, digit from finger. Yeah, he's a knob, isn't he?
Yeah, so basically Angel says he thinks her whole personality up to this point has been a lie because she didn't want to recount this, very traumatic experience. So, Daniel, I don't actually know, did you get the voicemail I left you when I got to this part of the book?
I think it went under the carpet.
That's cute.
Yeah.
No, you might not have known it was me because I was just screaming.
Yeah.
It was just screams.
Okay, well, I get a lot of those, so.
And so then they decide, okay, we're going to put a pin in this, we're going to go to sleep, not with each other. And Angel sleepwalks into Tess's bedroom, proclaims that she is dead, carries her out of the house across a rickety bridge, and places her in an open tomb inside a nearby church and kisses her. I hate this part of the novel. This is so stupid. It's a really
stupid bit. I love the way that Tess is like, ooh, maybe there's still hope for us. Yeah.
After too much tragic debate back and forth, they decide on their honeymoon to separate. So take that, short Kardashian marriages. And Angel's issues are sort of twofold here. One, the first issue that he has that he just cannot get over is that the man who raped his wife is still living, and that this random dude is, quote, her husband in nature. So we got a Biggie Tupac situation burgeoning over Tess's vagina. There's a normal sentence, but that is the spirit with which we're entering this. And two, the other issue is that if Angel dared to lower himself to marrying a working class wife, is it too much to expect that she at least be pure? And I want to take this book and crack it open over the core of a dying star and shake it until Angel Claire falls out. So you, sir, are on notice. You are no longer hot to me. I am pissed off.
He had a fantasy that all peasant women were kind of noble savages, didn't he?
Yeah, and meanwhile, Alec had the misunderstanding that all peasant women were goers. Anyway, Angel gives Tess some money. He says he's going to go try to deal with her whole history, but she needs to just not bother him until he sends for her. My question for you is, should Tess punch him first in the throat or in the balls?
I wonder if Angel Claire has a throat.
That's funny.
Thank you. So Tess goes home to Blackmore Vale, her home valley. She hears from the turnpike keeper, the local gossip, that's one of the advantages of keeping turnpikes, that her mum and dad have been celebrating her wedding to a gentleman and telling the whole village about it. They're all singing and drinking and roistering and whatever.
In fairness, wouldn't you? I mean, she has actually married a gentleman.
Oh, no, it's not. No judgment here.
I feel kind of bad for her parents, even if they are mortifying.
Yeah, well, Tess is pretty upset to hear that they're so proud, so she tries to return home undetected. by her fellow villagers. Tess gets home. She tells her mum. Her mum's royally miffed. She calls her stupid and things. She's like, why did you tell him? Why didn't you keep it to yourself? After giving her parents some of the money that Angel had given her, Tess decides to depart the family home to protect her own and her family's reputation, because obviously everybody's going to start gossiping if they see her around. Meanwhile, Angel is kind of mithering over the situation, kind of ruminating and wondering if he treated Tess unfairly. And he, instead of addressing the issue of his possible mistreatment of Tess, he decides
to run home and tell Mummy.
Well, and he goes home and tells his parents and then decides to go to Brazil.
Don't foul up an entire other continent with the fug of your hypocrisy, Angel. Jesus.
Yeah, foul and fug. Fug is foul and foul is fug. The narrator reminds us that in considering what Tess was not, he overlooked what she was and forgot that the defective... I was going to say detective. Forgot that the defective can be more than the entire. There's a little bit of sympathy from Hardy there. So Angel goes back to the conjugal farmhouse, you know, the old D'Urberville mansion.
The not really conjugal.
Yeah, the unconjugal farmhouse. Not really a conjugal, not really a farmhouse, isn't it? To pick up some stuff that he left there, and en route he sees Iz Hewitt, who was one of the other dairymaids that Tess worked with, and he worked with at the old dairy. One of the bin bets. The one who has not turned to drink, the one who has not tried to kill herself. Thank you. And he tells her about his and Tess's separation, and just kind of in a mad moment decides to ask her to come to Brazil with him. And we get this bit, he's like, why? He thinks to himself, why not be revenged on society by shaping his future domesticities loosely, instead of kissing the pedagogic rod of convention in this ensnaring manner? So he doesn't want to marry her, he just wants to run off with her unmarried. Hey, come be my mistress is what he's saying. Yeah. And to that I say, asshole! Did he and Alec D'Urberville change bodies in this moment? Yeah. Did they hold hands under a shooting star or something? The pedagogic rod. This is the closest we'll get into a queer reading, isn't it? Sadly, this is the closest we get to a queer reading. Also, just slight divergence from sexual norms. Angel is like to Iz, do you love me then? Do you think I'm bloody great? And she's like, well, of course I do, but no more than Tess. No one could love you more than her. And Angel's like, oh, and he's feel a bit sad. And he's like, actually, it was just a joke. I was just joking about asking you to live in Brazil with me, you know, that old gag. And Iz is like, well, I don't find that very funny. Angel is starting to feel guilty. Meanwhile, you know, so he's having some problems. Meanwhile, Tess's life is completely turned to shit. She roams the country impoverished and humiliated. At one point, she sleeps in a pile of leaves. She's like, Angel did like me best when I tasted of mushrooms. Maybe this'll bring him back? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the old fungal appeal. So she goes and sleeps in a pile of leaves and awakens to find herself surrounded by wounded pheasants that have escaped a shooting party and breaks their necks one by one to put them out of their misery. Jesus. And it's like, well, at least I'm not the most miserable being on earth. That's such a sad bit. That's probably the saddest, most dejected bit in the whole book, isn't it? This is the I Love Lucy chocolate conveyor belt levels of depression in this. I am trying to take the most depressing sentences and I'm just shoving them in my top, under my hat, in my mouth, just trying to keep up with all of this. It's hitting me in waves. It's allegorical as well, isn't it? Because there's that whole bit about aristocrats shooting them and how they just have a lust to destroy innocent things, and that's like Alec, isn't it? Tess is left supporting her whole huge family on the yearly money that Angel left her, but it just doesn't go far enough. She hears about a job at a different farm through one of the milkmaid friends, and the two of them are later joined by Iz. And Tess, of course, finds out about the whole "be my mistress in Brazil, oh no, just kidding" thing. You know, isn't that fussed by that, but doesn't particularly blame Iz. Then Tess also cuts off her eyebrows in a moment of pique. We all know about getting the bad depression haircut. This turns it into high art. This is like if Leonardo da Vinci did the sister's bad breakup haircut in Fleabag. So the work at the farm is really grueling. I love this bit. The turnip farm. Yeah, and Tess just cannot quite get by, even with the job on top of Angel's yearly allowance to support her family. They're just always underwater. So she finally works up the courage to go to Angel's family to ask for help. And as she's walking down the road, she finds herself accidentally walking behind Angel's brothers and Mercy Chant, who Tess knows by name as that basic bitch that his family wanted him to marry. She overhears the brothers gossiping about Angel's ill-fated marriage, and I gotta be honest, I would 100% be these brothers. If I had this twerp younger brother who f***ed
fucked it up this badly, I would never stop gossiping about him. And so Tess realizes the family will never accept her, they'll never help her, and she just turns back, and it's really tragic. And as she goes home, she stumbles upon a wandering preacher who turns out to be Alec d'Urberville, who has been converted by Angel's family. What a crock of shit.
Yeah, so Tess is initially disgusted by Alec's new guise. It is less a reform than a transfiguration. There's a kind of long little bit that's talking about how his old mannerisms are still sort of there. But she's like...
yeah, now using my pimping for the Lord.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. She acknowledges, though, that maybe he really is sincere in his conversion, even if he is still grotesque. She kind of wanders off and tries to get away, but Alec kind of sees that she was in this town where he was preaching and pursues her, and they have a kind of a chat on the road. He describes his redemption thanks to Mr. Clare.
Yeah, impressing Tess by name-dropping his new best friend, God.
Her father-in-law, and God. Both big names. So she also tells him about sorrow, doesn't she?
By the way, I bore you a child, f***o.
Yeah, so he is upset about that, isn't he? But also kind of is just a psychopath, so he doesn't really care too much. And then he's kind of like, oh, come on, I can see that you're all poor and shit, so why don't you, I'm going to be a missionary in Africa, why don't you marry me and join me? And she's like, well...
If it wasn't good enough for Jane Eyre, it's not good enough for me.
Tess is like, well, actually, I'm already married, and Alec's like, what? And
he's like, look, baby, your husband clearly rejected you, and without getting too romantic over here, one man's trash, am I right?
Yeah, pretty much. Next, we get all this stuff about the wheat thresher, and she goes back to work on the farm and is on the wheat thresher. It's an ordeal. Alec comes back, and he's, sniffing around the farm. He's back in his dandyish form. He used to be a preacher, now he's in his little dandyish tweeds, isn't he? And he's like, Tess, you've shaken me out of my religiosity. I'm going to be a hedonist again.
Yeah,
good on you, love.
He's like the peen bones connected to the soul bone, which is a part of eschatology they never covered in my religious studies class, but here we are.
Well, I think you no need to delve too deeply to work that out. And he propositions her yet again, and she slaps him with a glove.
Then, just when you think you can't pile on more crap, Tess gets some bad news from her younger sister, Liza Lou. As I had said earlier in the podcast, when is the worst possible time for Chekhov's coronary to go off? Because it's now, friend. Their father is dying, and with his death, the whole family will get kicked out of their home and have absolutely no way of supporting themselves, even beyond the money that Tess provides. So Alec sees this as his way in, and he continues to badger Tess into letting him help. He's like, hey baby, turns out it's your lucky day. I still want to have sex with you, and I still got money. You gonna be a dick about this? So she's completely worn down, and she finally is like, I literally have no other options. So she writes to Angel, and the only good news is that she's finally realized what a stupid fuckboy Angel is. She's done with him, and she writes that she will never forgive him for how he treated her, and she's gonna go off and live her best life and forget him. Yes, Tess, throw him in the fucking bin. So Alec moves Tess's family into a house, he takes care of them, but the implication is that Tess is gonna have to become his mistress. And I really love Tess for not agreeing to this necessarily, because I know she has no choice, but for not even pretending she has anything but disgust and contempt for him. And he's like, okay, you loathe me. I can work with that. I'm manifesting here. I thought you'd never be mine, but here we are. So
you need to compromise in a relationship, don't you, I think, yeah.
Iz and Marion, two of her milkmaid friends, see all of this go down, and they write to Angel saying, hey, Angel, hope you're close to done with your eat, pray, love cycle of bullshit, because you're treating Tess terribly. She's completely worn down trying to tend to her family. We kind of want to cover you in hornets and set you on fire, but you better come back here and get your house in order, because she's about to shack up with the literal, actual devil. Hurry.
We get a little kind of cut to Angel in Brazil, don't we? He's on a mule. He's been ill for years. Brazil didn't agree with him.
Good.
And he's just kind of like, oh, I've really balls this up. So he goes home and just looks like crap. He reads the letter from Tess and he's pretty upset, but he nevertheless resolves to find her. He manages to sort of, gets a little bit detective-y here, doesn't he? He manages to trace Mrs. Derbyfield to her kind of Ooh, it's quite a comfy cottage, isn't it?
I got a split level. I'm having a good time with it.
Why is your cottage so comfy all of a sudden? He kind of wonders, but he doesn't work it out. And he rings from her that Tess is now in Sandbourne, a trendy coastal resort. Angel visits Sandbourne and tracks Tess to a fashionable lodging house where she's going by the name of Mrs. d'Urberville.
Uh-oh.
And he's like, oh, that's funny that at least she's going by Mrs. Oh, Angel. And he finds her in nice duds. He looks like crap again. He's a mere yellow skeleton.
Okay, this is the most satisfying way to run into your D-bag ex when you look like $1 million and they look like hell. If I had been Tess, I would have looked him slowly up and down and twirled my rope of pearls and said something really arch and bitchy like, well, this is so delicious, it must be fattening, and then like blown a smoke ring in its face.
Tess tells him it's too late to reconcile.
She's like, honey, there's not a boombox in the world big enough.
She is now Alex's kept woman. And he had convinced her that Angel would never return. And that he would keep her family and funds if she became his mistress. And we get this really great chapter. So Angel's like, well, that's that buggered then, and he goes. Then we get this chapter that's all from the point of view of the landlady of the lodging house.
This is easily the best bit in this book, I think.
Definitely, yeah. The landlady of the lodging house that Alec and Tess are staying in. She's like, what's this other man doing here? I'll a little spy on these of my tenants, and she like looks through the keyhole and kind of eavesdrops a bit, and she kind of sees that Tess and Alec are having a bit of a fight, and she kind of hears like, oh, you said he'd never return, and stuff like that. And the landlady's like, well, whatever. Goes downstairs to her sewing, and then sees Tess leave. While she's sewing, she looks up and sees a scarlet blot growing on the ceiling, a gigantic ace of hearts.
Oh yeah, take me there, Daniel.
She goes upstairs to the d'Urberville flat and finds, at the 11th hour, a breakfast laid out. A substantial repast of coffee, eggs, and cold ham. Untouched.
I'm so happy for
Thank
you. I'm
you.
sorry there just weren't more items.
Yeah, well, it's a substantial repast. I mean, how many eggs we took? A whole pile of the buggers. Meanwhile, next to the important breakfast,
Wait for it.
from which a carving knife is missing, I should add, Alec is lying there, dead. He's been stabbed. He's in bed. The guy is dead.
Thank you,
For
up Dr. Seuss.
Yeah.
This is Dr. Seuss's dark period where he wanted to go into crime fiction but couldn't quite make the form work.
Yeah, so just focused on the breakfast.
Look, I know
And a big fried egg.
I know this is a messy situation, but this dude had to fall. Here we go. This is it, y'all. Did you want a murder spree romp 25 pages from the end of this book? Because that's what we got. Daniel, we're the first 400 pages just an amuse-bouche. So Tess has stabbed Alec's raggedy ass with a carving knife, and not a moment too soon, and my only notes on this situation are that she should have first of all gotten Alec to change his will in her favor, and then second of all somehow framed Angel for the murder. Think how satisfying it would be to lock eyes with Angel Clare as he's on the scaffold and give him the middle finger. But Tess doesn't do that because she has terrible taste in men, and she murders her one boyfriend and then manages to catch up with her husband at the train station and blurts out that she's killed Alec and does...
She's pretty cheerful about it as well.
Yeah, she's like, guess what I just done? Yeah, look at it! As her hands are covered in blood. And also, Angel, do you want to go on a Thelma and Louise style road trip with me? My God, can you...
Yes. That's what he said.
Yeah, he's like, yeah, no hesitation whatsoever. Can you imagine the gift she has given his bitchy brothers in terms of gossip? They're going to get so many brunches out of this. So Angel doesn't even hesitate to go with his murderous wife, and they claim squatters' rights on some local abandoned mansion. And I just think, can you imagine this headline in the modern day in some Florida newspaper? These assholes belong in Daytona. They know the police are after them, and Tess basically screams, "Cheese it, it's the filth." So the next day they hightail it to, wait for it, Stonehenge.
Stop everything. They have sex.
Do they?
Yeah.
Did I miss the sex? Have we traded personalities? You are all a quiver for this book.
It's just important that they do, because after so many years.
So they wake up in this mansion and they decide to hightail it to... Where do they go, Daniel? The least likely place?
Well, they bump into it, don't they? At night. Claire became conscious of some vast erection close in his front. We all know what he's talking about, don't we? It's Stonehenge.
In fairness, I suppose, who would think to look for them there? So, at this vast erection, Tess makes Angel promise that if anything happens to her, he'll marry her, 12-year-old sister, Liza Lou, because this family isn't f***ed up enough, right? And then...
Liza Lou's not even really been in it as well.
No, Liza Lou crops up at the last hour, yeah. So, Tess falls asleep on an altar at Stonehenge. I really hope they boinked on the altar as well. Like, let's get it death metal.
I can guarantee that.
You can guarantee it?
I can guarantee. I went to Stonehenge quite recently, and there were some impressions on the central stone.
They spend the night there, and in the morning, the police show up to arrest Tess, and Angel screams, "My woman's having a fucking nap! Can you guys wait till she wakes up?" And they do. The police wait. They just twiddle their thumbs, standing around waiting for her to wake up naturally. And then when she wakes up, they arrest her.
She's pretty chipper about it.
And yeah, she's really relieved. She's like, oh, thank God. Like, the relief of just not having to deal with all of her guilt anymore. So in the final scene, Angel and her sister Liza Lou, who sort of recently cropped up in this narrative, and I guess they're, softly engaged at this point, watch Tess get hanged, and then they walk off together on the worst first day I've ever heard. The end. Everyone was harmed in the making of this podcast. Should we do a little bit of casting?
Please.
It's not the most brilliant idea I've had, but I think it's actually a really solid idea. This book is hyper-realist, and it's been adapted for film a number of times in quite a realist way. We're not going to get... I don't really know what else we could do to adapt it, but I think what we should do is update it, set it in the present day, maybe in the early 2000s before cell phones were big, if it's going to work with Tess getting lost in the woods with Alec. Give it a real sense of claustrophobia, and I think make this another Ridley Scott road movie. Ridley Scott does a lot of films about women being assaulted, and he doesn't have any from the early 2000s. So I say set it in rural England, early 2000s, either Cillian Murphy or Timothy Oliphant as Alex, so somebody who's really handsome but has cruel eyes. We need Rachel Weisz as Tess. And then, for the Clare brothers...
That's what I'm here for.
The Fiennes brothers. We need slight aristos. And in the early 2000s,
good, yeah.
Joseph Fiennes was very handsome and very likable.
Shakespeare in Love.
And he would be the sort that you would feel genuinely betrayed if he turned into an asshat.
So who would be Angel?
He would.
Oh, and is Rafe?
Rafe is one of the other brothers.
How many Fiennes brothers are there?
3.
Who's the third?
I think he's a composer, to be honest.
But they just get him out.
Yeah.
Rafe
can talk over him or something.
Yeah, okay, just dress him up as a priest. And
Rafe does the heavy lifting here.
Arm in arm, yeah.
Right, should we do some analysis?
Yes, please. I liked all the sort of... I'm sorry, I'm just going to keep talking about all this metaphysical stuff. This sense that there's something more than just the sort of material existence, but it's somehow connected to it. Hardy's big on that. And he does it and uses it in kind of quite interesting kind of psychologistic ways, doesn't he? So there's the bit when Tess is talking about how miserable she is. She's like, she was not an existence, an experience, a passion, a structure of sensations to anybody but herself. To all humankind besides Tess, she was only a passing thought. So I just like all that stuff, that kind of sense that there is something more to the self than just their immediate presence, but only you notice it. You know, there's something sad about that, isn't there?
Yeah, there's so much in this book that is really tangled. Ideas of time and, history in the present, fate and free will, this very earthy bodiness and the soul.
Yeah. Modernization, there's a lot of that in there. The threshing machine, shitty, precarious work, the market. I like that bit with the milk going to London, and they're all like, oh, I can't believe Londoners will be drinking our milk. Yeah. But then also Wessex has this kind of rustic thing going on, and there's a kind of combined and uneven development is the term, I believe, for this sort of situation.
Well, despite the modernization, there are still, as we've shown through the Mayday, through the lineage stuff, the past is always present. You can never, it always sort of has its hooks into people somehow, and it always ruins your life. So you can modernize as much as you want, but you can't escape the past.
Well,
can't escape the past, old sport?
Yeah, I was about to say that. What do you mean you can't? Of course you can. But that's Alec, isn't it, as well? That the Stoke d'Urbervilles, as they call themselves, are definitely emblems of modernity. They're like paid up members of the bourgeoisie, but they disguise themselves as aristocrats because these past forms still have meaning, even though they don't really have any material reality.
So do you think that this is actually pro-aristocracy then? If it's called Tess of the d'Urbervilles, it's aligning her as an aristocrat.
But then there's also stuff about her inheriting all of these horrible manners that we haven't really talked about too much, but all the kind of like, there's the stuff that the d'Urbervilles decayed and were kind of revolting, and and that she might have inherited some of that, or she can redeem that.
But it's all these new money people, or the middle class people like Alec d'Urberville and Angel Clare, who are the worst people, and it's all of her milkmaid friends who are supposedly descended from...
It's a funny bit, isn't it, when it transpires that all of the milkmaids are somehow descended from aristocrats. But that's the real crux of it, isn't it? There's this thing about morality and modernisation. So we have that bit with Tess and her mother, Joan, and Hardy's like, oh, Tess went to the kind of state school. Schools didn't exist when Joan was a child, so when they're together it's like the Jacobean and Victorian ages juxtaposed. So we have this conjunction of the modern and the historical, don't we? But that's the whole not moral maybe, that's the whole sort of message of the novel, isn't it? That you have this kind of confused combination of older and newer forms. So Angel's like, yeah, I'm a modern guy, I'm a liberal guy. Yeah, okay, my dad went to university, I'm middle class, I'm happy to marry some common woman. You've been with another. He's a hypocrite, but he's a hypocrite because of the sort of uneven character of modernisation, isn't he? And in the same way that Alec is, I'm going to act the kind of aristocratic rake, but even he's slightly guilty about his rakishness, isn't he? He still does it. He's still a prick, but he's kind of not like a sort of just a knight like this is my due. There's this kind of everybody's kind of made complex by modernity, and they're also ruined by modernity.
So that is the end of our first season, our first 12 episodes that we promised you.
Hooray, it's over. God, I'm going for a serious lie down. I don't know about you.
Or is it?
Shit. I'm getting back up.
Yeah, you might want to pick yourself up off the floor, friend.
I'm a nightcap on my big long shirt. There's a clue.
We decided to throw in a 13th episode.
Unlucky some. Carry on.
That's how we pass the savings on to you.
Yeah.
No, this is we're doing
a baker's dozen.
We're doing a Christmas special, we decided. Our next book is not going to be hard for you to guess. It is a Christmas classic, and the whole plot potentially revolves around indigestion. This is the result of, quote, an undigested bit of beef, a blot of mustard, a crumb of cheese, a fragment of an underdone potato.
Yeah.
This list is purely just for Daniel to give him something.
I'm loving it.
So, we will actually do one more episode than we had planned for...
Just one I think I've got out, they drag me back!
Oh, please, you love it.
No, I'm loving it, yeah.
So this will come out right before Christmas. Please do stay tuned. I think it's the 22nd of December, so while you're wrapping your presents...
Christmas Eve.
Maybe.
This is going to be the best Christmas Eve ever!
Maybe think about having a listen while you're doing some baking or present wrapping or tree putting upping or what have you. All right. Thank you guys for listening to us so far. Please do write into our email at savemefrommyshelf@gmail.com or tweet us at smfms_podcast. Subscribe wherever you listen because it really helps us out because it makes it easier for other people to find us. It takes like 2 seconds. And we will see you for our maybe slightly longer Christmas special.
Or shorter. See ya.
It's not going to be shorter.
No. Thanks for listening to Save Me From My Shelf. Our music is The Overture to Don Giovanni by Mozart, and cover art is by Catherine Wu. Our thanks to Aston University's Centre for Critical Inquiry into Society and Culture for funding the startup of this podcast. Contact us at savemefrommyshelf@gmail.com or at smfms_podcast on Twitter. And do not I'm going to remind you, do not forget to rate, review, and subscribe. Do not forget. Thank you.